This tutorial is going to cover 3 separate topics, but I want to put them all together in one video, although I'll put chapter breaks down in the description if you want to skip to things. I'm putting them together because what I'm really trying to show you is how you can use these 3 different tools to replace a lot of redundant code that we have to put inside our levels, especially if we're using things like collision boxes and then we're casting to the player character and there were on event begin overlap and end overlap, and there's a lot of stuff that ends up being in there over and over again. You also might want to have something in a game where you're able to use one key, like I want to use the E key or the F key to interact with everything, to open a door, to pull a lever, to push a button, to pick something up. I don't want to have 8 different keys that I have to remember. I want to just use one key. So this is what this is going to do. I'm going to go ahead and start this level over here, and you can see that there's a old-fashioned collision box over here. So if I want some music to play at a certain spot in the game, that's perfectly fine. I can walk through this scary doorway, and then this music starts playing because I just went into that trigger box. It's great for cutscenes, anytime where you want something to happen, whether the player likes it or not, right? They're not making a choice. However, maybe you've got a stealth game or a horror game, and there you want to walk up to a door, and you don't want to just step into a collision box and have the door open like a sliding door at the grocery store. You want to be able to maybe listen to the door, peek through the keyhole, see is there a monster behind the door, and then when you're ready, hit the E key to open up the door, and then you can walk through, and maybe you don't want to shut it behind you. Maybe you want to leave it open for a quick retreat, or you do want to shut it because you want to make sure that nobody knows that you're in this room or you're hiding in this room, whatever. So those are situations where you're going to want the player to choose when they want to interact with things, and that's when an input action is very useful. So I also have this little cube over here. If I come up and put my little orange widget there, I just put a little kind of target in the center of the screen there so you can see where you're pointing. I'm going to point my little orange target onto this cube, and I'm going to hit the E key. It's going to play a little song. It's going to say whoopee up in the corner of the screen over there. Every time I click on this, it's going to play that song. It's going to rotate the cube 30 degrees, and it's going to print whoopee on the screen. Now this one is an entirely different blueprint actor, but I can hit the same key, the E key, and now it's a zap. Different song plays, and the box disappeared. So this is great for like health pickups or anything like that where you want something to sort of disappear away. That what I'm doing here is using the input action on the E key, and then I'm also using a blueprint interface to allow these different blueprints to talk to each other. And then this little red spear that I keep on shooting there, that's the line trace. So I'm going from where I am, from the camera, and I'm just clicking that E key. Every time I hit the E key, it's just measuring the distance between where my player camera is and what I'm looking at to see if it's close enough for me to interact with it. So like I can come back to, if I'm back over here and I hit the E key, I'm right on that cube, but it's not doing anything because I'm too far away. But if I come up close enough to it, now I'm within the range that I have set, and I'll show you how to do that. Now this little blue cube over here has physics on there. It's a real actor in the scene, but I can shoot little red spears at this all I want. It's not doing anything because I haven't used the blueprint interface saying that this cube is looking for this E key interaction. Now you can use the trigger boxes for a lot of the things that I'm showing you here, but there's situations where like an elevator button, you have an up and a down button on an elevator. That's really hard to do. Do you have to say like stand on this side of the elevator to go up and stand on that side of the elevator to go down? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But what I can do here in this case is these 2 buttons are exactly the same blueprints. I've just made a copy of them, and then I have an instance editable variable that just says this one is opening doors that are labeled 0, and this one is opening doors that are labeled 1. So if I click on this little button over here, you can see the door right next to me opens, and if I click on the other one, well, that door way down at the other end of the level opened. Even though I haven't moved, I'm standing in the exact same spot, I can control these different doors. So this blueprint is talking to another blueprint way at the other end of the level. You don't need to be standing inside a collision box. Like, how do I make a gigantic collision box to push a button to open a door way over there? Well, that's where these blueprint interfaces can be really handy. So let me just pop in here, and we'll start off with the first one. We'll just do the input action. All of these are very simple things, but like so many things in Unreal, you have to go down the checklist and do them all. If you forget one thing on the checklist, then it's not going to work. So I'm going to just use Control and Spacebar to open up the content drawer there. First, what I want to do is come down over here to my first person folder in my project, and I'm looking for this folder called Input. So I'm going to click on the input, and you can see here is the IMC default input. That is the input mapping context that the game is using by default, the first person character is using. We're just going to tap into this one and add one more bit of functionality to it. You can totally make these from scratch, and you can have lots of them. They can change at different times in the game. But the first thing we need to do is come to this little folder called Actions. I'm going to pop open this folder, and you'll notice that I already have one in here. That's my IA for input action underscore E. Now the name doesn't matter. The E is just to tell me that that's for the E key, because I might want to add other ones. Like right next to it here is one of the default ones. That's IA underscore jump. Well, that's triggered by the spacebar, so it's not IA spacebar. So the name of it doesn't have anything to do with the key that you're going to use. It's just to identify it for you. So to make a new one of these, all I'm going to do is right click on here, and I'm going to come to the input, and I'm going to find input action. And then when I select that, I just need to give this a name. So I will call this IA for input actor underscore B. We'll just call it for the B key. We'll just make it so that now when we push the B key, something will happen. So I'm going to pop open into this, even though you don't really need to, unless you want to have some of this functionality. The reason why they have switched to this new Unreal 5 version of action inputs is for this stuff down over here. So you can come in here and say, oh, what are the triggers? I could add more in here, and I could say, well, I want this to be a chorded action. I want it to be, Control-Shift-B or something, or I want to hold and release. Like you see that in games when you're using a bow and arrow. You hold the left mouse button down to aim the arrow, and then when you release it is when you shoot the arrow, right? So there's other things that you can do, and you could always do this in Unreal. You just had to add a whole bunch more code in your blueprint. Now you can just like pick one of these, but we're just going to make it a default. When we hit the B key, something is going to happen, so we don't need to add any of these. So in fact, it doesn't matter because I didn't tell it to do anything, but I'm just going to delete that little extra bit of information so you can give it some description. All of this is optional for what we're doing. So you don't even really need to open this up if all you want is something to happen when the B key presses. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and we're all set. Oh, and we'll look at that here in a bit. So we'll add to that later on. I'm going to come over here to the first person character, and remember that's just down over here in the first person blueprints, and you're going to have first person or third person character depending on what you're using. Double click on that, and that's just going to bring you into this. So here's the one that we're going to add here at the end when we actually do the line trace. That's what my input action underscore E is doing over here. So when you hit the E key, all this stuff happens. But let's just go back up to the top here, and you can see where this is coming from. So here is the code that comes with the first person player character. On event begin play, we're getting which player controller we're talking about, and then we're putting this enhanced input action into action. And this is that add mapping context that we're looking at. Remember the IMC default we saw in the content drawer? There it is right there in the list. And you can switch right there to a new one that you have made. We're not going to do that because we're just going to kind of hack into this one in a moment and just use that one. But you can also have multiple versions of this node. So you could have another one right after here that adds more functionality. And then you could have them come on under conditions. So maybe when you gain new abilities, there's buttons that didn't do anything earlier on your game that do now that you've picked up a new weapon or you've learned a new magic spell or whatever. So there's a lot of customizability here with that, but we're not going to mess with any of this because we're just going to use this default. So let's go ahead and do that now. That's the next thing we need to do. Go back to that input folder here, and we're going to open up that IMC default. I'm going to pop that open here, and you can look and see here's the default ones, and here's the E button that I've added. So don't push this button. I always want to click over here, and then it adds more functionality to the E. What you want is this little button up over here, and that's going to allow us to add a new one. And this is actually pretty easy. If you've already set up the input action, then just pop this open and just pick it from the list. So there's input action B right there, the one we just made. I can select that one. And then if I just want to assign the B key to it, just click on this little keyboard icon, and then the next button you push, like the B key, will be what is assigned to that. So that's it. I'm done. Again, there's other things that you can do in here, but we're not going to mess with those right now. I can just go ahead and close this, and now I can actually use the B key to trigger events in my scenes. All right, so let's take a look at the next thing that I want to talk about, which is the blueprint interface. How do we get this right here? So this is my little disappearing cube that we were looking at earlier on. So all that happens is this event, this custom event, event interact from BPI blueprint interface use. That's the one that I made to do things in my level here. So I'm printing the string. That's the little zap that was up on the screen. The little sound we heard is right here. Play the sound. And then in the case of the cube that disappeared, destroy actor. And the actor it's destroying is target self. So that's pretty simple. That's all the code that is in the cube. I don't have to have any kind of on event overlap and none of that. It's just firing this little bit of code off of that. And that's the exact same thing in all of the other ones as well. So let's see how we do that. So I'm just going to come back here to the map, and I'm going to Control and Spacebar just to open up the folder again. I'm just going to go up to my blueprint folder at the top here. So here's the one that I already have. Let me pop that one open real quick so you can see what's in here. All that's in here is this interact. So notice that all my things are called interact, even though I recommend that you maybe don't use interact, just make it something that you're going to remember. Interact is a little generic sounding, so maybe you call that, my call or something or whatever. So this is the interact that I'll be looking for later on. That's where it comes from, the name you give this function. So I just wanted to show that to you. So I'm going to close that, and we'll make a new one over here. I'm going to just go back over. All you need to do to make a new one, right click on a blank spot in your content browser, and we're going to come up here to Blueprint and Blueprint Interface. So we're just going to select it from right there, and then all basically it's looking for is a name. So we'll call this one Blueprint Interface BPI _. We'll call this Bob. So Bob is the name of our new Blueprint interface. You can call it anything you want. Whatever makes sense for you is what you can call this. Now we're going to double click into this, and here's where we were just a moment ago. Here it says new function. I'm just going to call this call Bob, and that's what I'll be searching for. So if I were to use this one, if I wanted Bob to be my Blueprint interface, the thing that I will be searching for in my right click on my event graph is call Bob. So we're not looking for BPI Bob. Well, in some cases we are, but when we're actually writing the code, this is what we're looking for, this little name over here. Now you can add more inputs and outputs. You can do all kinds of things to this, but this is not a piece of Blueprint. See, it says read only. This is only a place to make this little function have more abilities. But right now, the only thing we need it to be is just a little radio station broadcasting like, hey, is anybody using the Bob interface? And if they are, well then fire off this code that we're going to tack onto this. Now let's remember to compile. Compiling is important in a lot of the steps that we're doing right now, because you'll have done everything right and you'll be searching for something and it's like, the thing I'm looking for isn't coming up. What's wrong? It may simply that you just haven't clicked the compile button yet. So the last thing we need to do now is going back to our first person character. We're going to take a look at this actual these little red spears that I've been throwing around here, this line trace by channel. So I'm just going to show this to you really quickly, and then we'll just recreate it, because there are a few tricky things. You can't just kind of copy this by looking at it. There's a few steps that you need to do that are a little trickier. So the first thing we need to do when we're doing any blueprint is we need to come up here to this class settings, the disappearing cube, the rotating cube, all of my blueprints that are looking for this input E here, they're looking for that, that blueprint interface, are using this class settings button. So click on this class settings button, and if you look down over here where it says implemented interfaces, that's what that says, implemented interfaces, I've added BPI use. So let's go ahead and just add, oh, there it is right there, BPI Bob. So now I've got Bob and use. That's how you add it. So that's on the class settings. You need to click this little gear button and then come down over here and add the name of the interface that you've given it. So this is the one place where you do search for Bob as opposed to call Bob. So I'm just going to delete that one because we don't actually want that and say yes to that. So I'm just using, it's just looking for this BPI use in this. So, but you have to have that. That's one of the steps that you need to remember to do. You also need to remember to compile. Even if you've added it down over here already, it's right there. Until you hit that compile button, you're not going to be able to bring it up in your graph. So hitting that compile button is really important with this. So what's going on here is that we're using the E key. When I hit the E key, it's coming over here and it's creating a line trace. And that's just basically shooting out a little ray from anything you want. It doesn't need to be from our camera. We're going to use our camera because we want where the player is looking to be the thing that we're looking for. But you could actually put this on another mesh and make like a rotating laser turret or something like that. So like there's lots of ways that you can use a line trace, but we're going to just use it to make sure that the thing that we are looking at is something we can interact with. So what we need to do first of all is get our camera. We're going to pull that off. I'll show you how to do all this in a second. We're getting the camera's position in the world. We're getting what direction it's facing. And then we're setting a number right here. I've set mine to 300 because I want this to be a pretty close thing. This is opening doors, pushing buttons, that kind of thing. So 300, remember, is centimeters in Unreal. And that means that's a meter right there. So that's pretty close. It's like a little bit like 3 feet, right, away from something, which is about right for picking something up or pushing a button or that sort of thing. But you can change this. So maybe this line trace is about throwing fireballs or something like that. This wants to be 3,000 centimeters or whatever. That's up to you to decide. You can set this number and I'll show you how. And then we're going to add the start to the end of our line here, and that's going to be the start and the end of our line trace. And then all we're going to do is break out the hit. What did it hit? We're going to make this break hit result. We're going to pop this out, and there's all kinds of things you can do with this. You can figure out like where does a decal need to appear if you're shooting a rocket at a wall and you want the wall to have a scorch mark on it when the rocket hits the wall. Well, that's done with the same, that'd be the location and the normal impact point, that kind of thing. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with this. All we need is the simple what was hit. What was the thing that we hit? And then we're going to ask it, does it implement that interface? And we choose the interface. There's my BPIUs in there. And if it does, then it's going to go ahead and fire off this little bit of code. So first it checks over here with the branch, did we hit something? Yes or no? Because you could just shoot up in the air and it didn't hit anything. But you could also hit the floor or hit one of those blue cubes that aren't looking for this interface. So it's saying, did you hit something? Well, I did. Okay, well, did the thing that you hit use that interface? And if both of those are true, then it fires off this little interact messenger over here, and it sends that off to disappearing cube. And there's the other end of it. That's the receiver for this message that's being sent out over here. Hopefully that's making sense. So you can see here's the interact interface being used. You can always check over here and make sure that you've got it in use over here. And here's all of our variables and things that we have employed. So let's go ahead and do this together. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on a blank spot on the screen, and I'm looking for that input action underscore E, and there it is. So there's my input action. That's exactly the same. We could also have, if we'd added Bob over here, we could have brought up IA underscore B and had a B button push. So now we're going to pull off of this. Let me just zoom in here a little bit. I'm going to pull off of started in this case, and I'm going to look for line trace by channel right up there. That's the one we want. That's what we're looking for. Now remember, we need to pull off a reference from our first person camera. So I'm going to come up over here to the components. I'm just going to drag and drop in our first person camera. The first thing we need to do is get world location. So there we go, get world location. And then I'm going to pop off of this one here, and I'm going to look for get forward vector. Okay, now here's forward vector under math, but we actually want the one that's down over here under transformation. Get forward vector for transformation, because remember, transformation is a position, rotation, scale, right? Those are the transforms. So I'm going to say there's get the forward vector. So this one here is where is the front of the camera. That can go right into the start. That one's easy. We just pop that one in over here. But on this step, this is the one little bit where it gets a little tricky. So I'm going to pull off of this, and I need to multiply the length of our vector here. Basically, I need to say how long is the little line that we want to shoot out. So we're going to add a multiply. I'm just going to hit the asterisk key on my number pad on my full-size keyboard. If you don't have one of those, you can just type multiply. You can search for multiply and do that. There it is. Now, the tricky thing here is that what we really want to do is just have one field in here. We want to say, well, how long is our line? We don't want to be worrying about how long is it in X, Y, and Z. So the one thing that's hard to copy from just looking at the graph, you want to right-click on that lower pin, and then we're going to say convert this pin to a float single precision. So that's right-clicking on that bottom pin and then finding two floats. And then when we do that, now we just get that one field and we're good to go. And we do want to type a number in here, even if you change your mind. I'm just going to say 1000 on here. It's going to revert back to the 3 vector if you don't do that for this next step. I'm going to pull off of this, and I'm just going to hit the plus button on my full-size keyboard. You can search for add. Either one of those will work. And now I've got this going out of this one, and I want to add it with the, doesn't matter which pin I'm using here because it's addition. So I'm adding the start of the ray, adding it to the length of it, and that's going to tell me where the end of that ray is going to be. So there we go. That's basically the tricky part of this. Now, what we need to do is come off of the out hit on here, and we're going to look for break hit result right there. I'm going to grab that, and you can see it's the drawer is shut on here. Pop that drawer open. The one we're looking for over here is the hit actor. Remember, what we want to do on this is check to see, did the thing that we hit use the interface, right? So I'm going to pull off there and say does implement interface. So does implement interface, there it is. Remember to select the one we want. So we're going to select this, and I'm just going to look for my use interface, or you could choose Bob, whatever you call yours. There's my BPI use, and there it is. That's ready to go. And then also we need to come up here and do a couple of branches. So we're going to pull off of the execute on here. I'm just going to hit the B key. That's going to give me a branch. So because the first thing I want to do was, did something get hit? We're going to take the return value of this, plug that in. Did something get hit? If so, yes. So off the true, hit that B key again. There's the branch, and we're going to say say, well, did the thing that get hit implement the interface that we were using? If so, yes. And then we can go over here and call off of this last one, the interact. So I'm going to look for interact, and I got a whole bunch of them. So here's my actual like event that we used at the beginning, the red one. And then what are all these for? Well, the one we're looking for is the one that says message, right? You can see there's that little envelope up there where we want this to go on, talk to a different one. So when I come over here and say interact here, I'm looking for interact message, and that's going to get me this little blue one with the envelope in it. Again, it's interact for me because that's what I named the function. If we were using the Bob one, it would say call Bob. That's what we'd be searching for, or whatever you call yours, whatever you name that. And we also need to remember to pull this little pin back here from the hit actor and plug it into the target, because we have to say like, well, where is this message going to? Oh, it's going to the thing that got hit. And that's it. That's basically recreated the code that we've done up over here. That's how you set up a line trace. Remember, hit that compile button. I'm actually going to delete all this code and drop that out. And the one thing I want to show you now is how do you make a new actor that does that. So let's make a new one, maybe a cube that shrinks or something like that. So we'll come over here, we'll just make a regular Blueprint class. We'll just make it an actor. We'll call this shrink me. And then we'll open up shrink me over here. Just double click on that and maybe we'll add a sphere instead of there we go, add a sphere. We'll throw a quick material on here just so it looks a little different. Well, yeah, we go, choose the yellow one, that's fine. Hit compile. And then I'll come over here to the event graph on that. And then I can get rid of all of this. I don't need any of that over here. But the event that I need to call to begin with is that interact, right? So let's try that here. I'm going to right click on here, interact. And it's like, okay, well, there's the message one. There's the what have we forgotten to do? I'm getting the BPI use interact. That's the end of the line. That's not the one we want. We want that red event one. Why is that not showing up on our list? What did we forget to do? Got to go up to class settings, and we got to come down over here and add that. We need to add use, BPI use in our case here, and there it is. So now that we have that, hey, let's do it again. I'll right click over here and we'll go interact, and it's still not showing up. Why is it not? We have to compile. So hit that compile button, and then for the third time's a charm, let's come up over here, interact, and then now we're finally getting event interact. That's the one we want. That's that red one that's got the little blueprint interface on it there. Now we're ready to go, and we actually can pull off of this over here, and we're going to set the relative scale. We're going to set relative scale 3D sphere. That's what we're looking for. It's the sphere is the object. Whoops, you come over here. That's the target, our sphere over here. We're going to set that scale. So we're going to make a new scale out of this. But we could just change these numbers and it would only do it once. So we want to make it so that every time we click on it, it gets a little bit smaller. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to right click over here and we're going to get the world scale. That's the world scale. There it is. Get world scale of the sphere. And again, these are redundant. I could actually like take this over here and plug that in and just delete that one. They're not hurting. It's not hurting having two of them, but it's doing the exact same reference. So now we're getting the scale of the sphere. So each time we shrink it, we'll get a new one out of that. So now out of this, I'm going to do one more bit of math. I'm going to hit the minus key this time and to do a subtract because I want to make it smaller. And then the tricky bit here is I'm going to put in 0.25 in each one of these. And why am I not putting a minus 0.25? Well, the reason why it's not minus is this is already a minus. This is a subtraction. So we're getting the shrink from the subtraction. So I'm going to plug that right into that new scale. We could, play a sound cue if we wanted. We could do other things. We could make it disappear, all that kind of stuff. But I think that's all we really need. Let me just double check. Yeah, that looks good. I'm going to hit compile again. Let's go back to our first person map. We'll open up our drawer. We'll toss in a little shrink me sphere in the scene. Let's move it so that it's not quite in the way. And let's see if it works. I'm going to go ahead and jump into play, and I'm going to run up to it. I'm going to point my little orange circle at it, hit my E key, and look, every time I click on it, it's getting 25% smaller. If I click on it one more time, oh, it disappears because it got too small. Oh, hey, I forgot to tell you, how do you turn off these things when you're all done with that? Let's go back to our first person character, these little spears that we're throwing around over here. That's on the line trace here. That is this draw debug type here. It's for duration. Just set that to none, and then the little spears will go away. You have to turn it on. It's off by default. So if you want to actually see what you're clicking on, you need to turn those on. That's it. That's all you need to do. So using those three tools, input, action, blueprint interface, and line trace together will allow you to get rid of a whole bunch of extra code. And then when you come up with a great new idea, oh, I want to add a new wheel that you crank to raise a drawbridge or whatever, like adding a new asset is just as simple as going up to that class settings and implementing that interface, and then it's all ready to go. You just fire off your event, and you don't have to spend a whole bunch of time putting in in the on overlap, end overlap, or whatever. So hopefully that all made sense, and go off and give it a try.